Imagine a lion surrounded by hunters, feared but alone. What saves him is not brute force, but the cold gaze of a strategist. Machiavelli understood early what few leaders dare to face. Being loved is desirable, but being feared is necessary. This is not a manual for tyrants. It is a mirror, an uncomfortable reflection of what it means to lead in a world that doesn't always reward kindness. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But the secret lies in the nuance few notice. Fear must be measured, calculated, never accompanied by hatred. In 16th century Florence, he saw political chaos up close. Rulers who fell for being too good, others who maintained power through cunning. Machiavelli didn't preach cruelty, he preached clarity. The prince for him is one who understands the game of reality, who knows when to act with generosity and when to show firmness, who grasps that the image of power can save more lives than the illusion of niceness. And this applies to you, even without a crown, because at some point we all lead a team, a family, or our own life. To be feared without being hated is a subtle art. It demands respect, not terror, clear boundaries, not threats. Once Machiavelli was asked what's better, to be loved or feared. He returned the question to the world, because deep down he knew those who are loved can be betrayed, but those who are wisely feared endure. If this video makes you think, subscribe. We don't offer easy answers, just good questions. Modern society preaches diplomacy, but often mistakes it for weakness. We are surrounded by the fear of displeasing, of saying no, of setting limits. And that wears us down. If Machiavelli lived today, perhaps he'd say, be firm but fair. Do not promise what you cannot deliver. Do not do good if it leaves you exposed to harm. In personal life, this means not being a hostage to the need to please, not bending to be accepted, understanding that respect is earned with truth, not submission. The leader who smiles too much, yields too much, fears conflict, soon loses the invisible throne we all hold in the eyes of others. To be feared in this context means to be clear, to be firm, to not fear being misunderstood as long as you remain ethical. And here lies the dilemma, how to balance this with humanity. The answer may lie in another of Machiavelli's lines, "The ends justify the means." A phrase misunderstood, abused, to defend the indefensible. But what if the end is order, peace, survival? It is possible to be tough without being cruel, stern without being unjust, just as it's possible to love and still command respect. True leadership might dwell in that blind spot between tenderness and fear, a place where a firm gaze protects more than soft words ever could. At his core, Machiavelli knew that power reveals. It doesn't create monsters, it merely exposes what was already there. And you, if you held absolute power for a day, would you keep the smile, or wield silence like a sword? Perhaps the question isn't how to lead, but how to remain human, even when the world demands we become lions. But a lion alone does not rule the forest. His reign is sustained by the sharp gaze of the fox. Machiavelli teaches that power without intelligence is brutality, and intelligence without courage is impotence. True strength lies in combining both. In moments of crisis, masks fall. The boss becomes a tyrant, the gentle retreat, and only those who have prepared their spirit stand as bridges between firmness and compassion. Perhaps the new prince, today, wears no armor, but knows how to say no without raising his voice, walks with firmness without stepping on others, and carries within not the desire to be adored, but the responsibility of being whole. If you've come this far, reflect how many times have you erased yourself to avoid displeasing others? And what if the respect you seek only arrives when you stop asking for permission to be who you are? Subscribe. Here, reflection doesn't aim to turn you into someone else, but to remind you of the strength you've always had. In silence, like a modern prince who rules not through fear, but through presence. And remember, leadership begins the moment you stop fearing solitude and start honoring your own voice. Because perhaps The true art of power isn't in commanding others, but in no longer needing to. And still, there is a deeper layer, one we seldom acknowledge. The leader is not a role, but a mirror of our inner battle. Between desire and discipline, between impulse and foresight, power in this sense is not what we hold over others, but what we restrain within ourselves. Machiavelli's brilliance was not in manipulation, but in perception. He saw how illusions shape empires, how people follow those who seem unshaken, not because they are fearless, but because they've made peace with their own darkness. Leadership begins in the silence before a decision, in the storm of self-doubt before a boundary is drawn. It's forged not in triumph, but in the refusal to betray one's core for applause. A prince who cannot rule himself cannot rule anything. And so we return to the personal. To you, what forces have you surrendered to in the name of harmony? What parts of yourself remain buried beneath the expectations of others? The art of being feared without being hated starts with being whole. A person who knows their worth does not need to shout. Their presence sets the tone. In your family, at work, among friends, you are already leading, whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is not whether you influence, it's whether that influence emerges from truth or fear of rejection. Machiavelli might whisper today, better to be misunderstood and authentic than celebrated while hollow. The modern prince is the one who builds boundaries as bridges, who leads by example, not imposition, who dares to walk alone, because solitude is not isolation, but alignment. This is your crown, invisible perhaps, but real. Wear it, and lead. And if this message echoed something you've always felt but never had words for, subscribe. Here we're not chasing likes, we're creating moments of recognition. You're not alone in this depth, and every week we dive again.